Well, hello everyone. My name is Brian DiNapoli. I work with Drug Free Lumpkin and so happy you all could be here. This is a pleasure. And these are two passions of mine, prevention and sports that uniquely come together tonight. And as a person in long-term recovery and a former high school athlete, this really hits home for me. And also like to introduce my director, my manager, Latrice Roby, if you just want to say hello, Latrice.
Hello, everyone.
Well, thank you. Thank you again for joining us. And our first speaker, her name is Debbie Burnt, and she runs a very unique program called Protect Your Game. And it's essentially to encourage student athletes to make smart decisions on and off the field and to teach young athletes how to avoid mistakes that could cost them their future, mainly through abusing alcohol and other drugs. So, Debbie, I'm going to turn it over to you, and we really look forward to this.
Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate everyone being here. If you are with us live or if you are watching the recording, if you want to grab that QR code, if you use your phone, it takes you to a pre-survey and just tell us a little bit about what you're thinking, where you're at. That would be great. Mark is going to, from the Players NIL, is going to be presenting after me, and we just want to get everybody's opinion on this content and where we might take it. So thank you so much. So I just want to get started. Like Brian said, we are a prevention program. We are focused on high school athletes, coaches, and parents. And one of the reasons is because when we look nationally, we see that about 60% of high school students are playing a sport. So a lot of high school students are engaged in athletics. And we know that every athlete has a really unique role to play on their team and towards their team's success. Their team needs every athlete to be at his or her best. We also know that athletes in high school tend to have real influence in their communities, both on and off the field. And we also know that older athletes really inspirational to younger athletes. And we also know that substance use can kind of get in the way of all of this. There's some real value when athletes choose to be substance free. And it's things like optimal health, real physical and mental uh, just operating at the highest level possible, really operating from an athletic standpoint and really being able to maximize your performance. Then getting everything a young athlete puts into their sport out of it. The team can perform at its highest level when every athlete's performing at theirs, and there can be real team bonding. That beer on a Saturday night with each other, that's not bonding. That's just drinking. What kids are doing together on teams, what they are trying to achieve, that's where the bonding comes from. There's three major stakeholders in high school athletics. This won't be surprising, but it's athletes, it's coaches, and it's parents. One of the reasons we mention this is because the NCAA actually recognizes these stakeholders as being really important to prevention. And also, the NCAA is not about substance use. So if athletes are out there in high school and thinking about playing at that higher level, they want to understand that. If we just think about college in general, how old are you in college? 18 to 22, roughly. That means a majority of athletes are going to be what we would consider drug minors, under 21, and not of age to use alcohol or other drugs. Even for kids that are older and that are of age, the NCAA doesn't consider substances safe. So anyway, the goals of our program are really pretty simple. It's to create a common vocabulary or a commonly understood narrative around drugs and alcohol. And we do that in two ways. The first is we're going to talk about the latest in substance science, and we're bringing that to the high school athlete. What alcohol, marijuana, nicotine do to athletic performance. We also encourage communities to look at and understand their school district policies policy and state policy around substance use and athletics. There usually is some pretty clear rules and regulations. The outcomes that we look for and that we tend to see is that conversations among those three stakeholders become more productive. And if there are athletes out there thinking about substance use, that they have both a rational and potentially shared basis for choosing not to use. So if we were in your community specifically, we would really dive into policy. We'd be looking at a summary, looking at some vocabulary, making sure we all understand the consequences. Sports, there's a lot of people engaged in the sports process, parents, athletes, coaches, and we just want to make sure everyone has read that policy. I always laugh. I am a sports parent. My kids are older now. I have 3 of them. I have an 8-year spread between their ages. That means I was a high school parent for 12 years in a row, and they all played sports to varying degrees. I did not read my school district's policy until year 9 when we were working on this program. And I realized that nobody reads this policy. And I even signed it 9 times without reading it. So again, we just want to get everybody on the same page. We want everybody operating from the same playbook. One thing we do like to talk about, though, is prescription drugs really quickly. School district policies do not govern prescription drugs. Those are between an athlete and their doctor. Sometimes there might be a policy about what needs to happen with a prescription drug if it's on campus. And we always recommend everyone go look for that policy. But some general things to know is that using a prescription drug that has not been prescribed to you is illegal. And selling a prescription drug, say to a friend, is actually a felony. This is inside general narcotics law, right? It's not about the school district policy. This applies to everyone of every age. That said, if you live in a medical marijuana state, those cards are not prescriptions, they're recommendations, and they are typically covered under the school district policy. So that's all we like to do with policy. Then we want to move on to the science. And the one thing that we always say is we're not interested in talking to young people or really having a moral conversation with them. We don't want to talk about drugs are good or bad or right or wrong or anything like that. We really want to talk biomechanics. This is a science conversation, and we always say science, not judgment. So let me just dive in. We start with alcohol, couple of details. One, alcohol is a depressant. That's the class of drugs that it fits into. Alcohol makes a person drunk primarily through dehydration. Does some other things, but most people don't think about that. Why does it make me drunk? Well, one of the reasons is the membranes inside a person's brain get dehydrated and misshapen, and the neurochemicals don't cross the membranes the way they're supposed to. Another interesting fact is that alcohol is water soluble, which means it washes out of an athlete's body in about 24 hours, or anyone's body. The major effects of alcohol are predominantly physical, and we see things like alcohol constricting aerobic metabolism, which reduces endurance. It makes weight difficult to maintain, and that can be difficult to gain or difficult to lose, depending on your metabolism. It inhibits the absorption of nutrients. So what does that mean? Some athletes are actually eating a diet very specific to their athletic performance. They're trying to achieve some things kind of in a holistic way. All of us eat food for the vitamins, minerals, proteins, carbohydrates that we get out of that food. And alcohol gets in the way of that. One of the things it does is it keeps protein from actually synthesizing in our body. So all of this causes a reduction in endurance and increase in injury. And an athlete, a big part of being an athlete is recovery. Athletes are exerting themselves in all kinds of ways and tearing down tissues and rebuilding them for greater strength and agility. Alcohol can get in the way of that process. It disrupts sleep and hydration. Use within 24 hours of an activity significantly reduces aerobic performance. If there are any athletes out there, if you have any adults in your life that are runners, ask them if they would ever drink the night before a race. They will almost 100% tell you no way because they can feel it. And then this is kind of the big one. We have research that shows us weekly use of alcohol can double the rate of injury among athletes. So what is that? Weekly use is weekend use. So that beer on a Friday night may not just be a beer on a Friday night. Now, we don't get crazy about this. Not everyone's showing back up to practice on Monday and is going to get hurt, but it's doubling the chance of that happening for no athletic reason. So that's what we want everyone to understand about alcohol. And then we move on and talk about marijuana. Just to level set, we want everyone to understand these words all mean the same thing. Marijuana, weed, pot, lots of slang words out there, and cannabis are all talking about the same plant. Cannabis is just the Latin name for that plant. That plant contains cannabinoids, which are chemical properties, and those are why people use that plant. THC is the one that makes a person high. CBD, we kind of hear about in different contexts. And then marijuana, or THC, is in really a drug class almost by itself, but one of its major properties is that it's hallucinogenic. It distorts perception, it distorts time and space. And unlike alcohol, which kind of affects a person very generally through dehydration, marijuana makes a person high by spoofing what we call the endocannabinoid receptor system. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Another crazy thing about this drug is that it is lipophilic or fat soluble. It's not water soluble. You'll hear me say this in the video just a second, but this is one of the most interesting aspects of this drug.
Marijuana is fat soluble. If you don't remember anything else about marijuana, remember this. It's one of the most interesting biodynamics of this drug. Let's compare it to alcohol. Alcohol is water soluble. A person drinks alcohol, also known as ethanol. It gets into the blood and goes to their brain. It makes a person drunk. Then the alcohol washes out of their body in about 24 hours. This happens by the person's blood moving the alcohol to the body's excretory systems. Sweating, peeing or urination, and breathing are some of the body's excretory systems, and they are how alcohol leaves a human body. In contrast, when a person smokes a joint or ingests THC in any of its forms, like vapes, edibles, topicals, etc., the THC gets into the bloodstream, it's carried to the brain and makes a person high. While the person is still high, the body starts pulling the remaining THC out of the bloodstream and deposits it into the fatty tissues around the body. There are a lot of fatty tissues in the brain, but THC is stored everywhere. This, by the way, is what the body does with all kinds of fat-soluble toxins. Once a person is done being high and their body is more at stasis, meaning they are more relaxed, the body starts releasing the THC out of the fatty tissues back into the bloodstream to be carried to those same excretory systems. The THC is peed, sweated, and breathed out. Interestingly, if more marijuana is used before the other has left the body, the THC load, as they call it, will build up in the fatty tissues. When the THC is released back into the blood, it can cause a small amount of impairment for some people. The person experiencing the release would not seem high or necessarily feel high. Even if there was a small amount of impairment, they could seem fine. But if they took a drug test, the THC could show up. If you've ever heard someone say they tested positive for marijuana but hadn't used it in over a week or more, this is why. A metabolite form of marijuana, or THC, in the urine is getting picked up on the drug test. While many people might seem fine, there are people in society for whom even a little bit of impairment can be very dangerous, like pilots. Periodically, pilots take very sophisticated physical and memory tests to make sure they're safe to fly us around. These highly calibrated tests can pick up this low-grade impairment, proving that some compromise can be happening all week after a person uses marijuana, even if they don't feel high. This also tells us that weekend use can impact learning, performance, and athletic improvements of every kind all week.
Okay, so this is a compound or drug that's everywhere nowadays, right? And there's a ton of misinformation. There's a lot of just non-information out there. So we do spend a little bit more time talking about it. That said, I just don't want anyone to worry about the vocabulary. We are going to have kind of a sciencey conversation, but nobody's going to get tested on it. And we just want you to kind of understand conceptually what we're talking about. I know you will. So alcohol's effects were predominantly physical. Marijuana's effects are really neurological, which means about the brain. And a person's brain, especially a young brain, is always changing. It changes and grows through feedback, through experiences and sensory input. Everything a young person does impacts how their brain grows. In fact, the brain is so adaptive that the brain you all woke up with this morning is not the brain you're going to bed with tonight. It's that elastic. And it turns out that your brain ends up being your most important athletic tool. So because the brain is always changing through feedback, that means every game, every practice, every conversation, everything you do to study or engage with your sport builds a greater understanding of your sport. We call this your athletic repository, everything an athlete knows instinctively, physically, cognitively, about how to play. Now, marijuana, unfortunately, can change a person's athletic repository because it affects that thing I said earlier, that endocannabinoid system. That is a neural network in your brain and body that's made up of CB1 and CB2 receptors, and cannabinoids are the neurochemicals that run on that system. So amazingly, our bodies make its own cannabinoids when it needs that system to function properly. Anandamide is one of those cannabinoids that we're starting to hear a little bit about. But, okay, remember, marijuana, THC, is a cannabinoid. And in fact, it battles anandamide for the use of that system. THC always wins that battle because THC comes into the brain and body in massive quantities versus how much the body actually needs. It takes over that system, knocks anandamide off. When people hear that, they'll say, well, if my body needs cannabinoids to function, is that really that bad? And the short answer to that is yes, because of homeostasis. This is a little cool illustration of the white line is the anandamide, and then the brain's being flooded with the green line, which is THC. It takes it over. And because the brain is always seeking balance, it has to respond when it gets too many cannabinoids. One of the responses is it will start shutting down receptors on the receiving side of a brain cell. And when that happens, neurochemicals can't run through the brain correctly. And so, learning and memories and things don't get processed correctly. This is a real physiological event that we can see in MRIs. This is a non-user, young brain. And then this is a brain of a very heavy user, really daily, not casual, but very heavy user. Those dark spots that you see, they're not holes, but they're where neural activity has slowed way down in those parts of the brain where those receptors have turned off. So another question might be, why does she keep talking about this system, the endocannabinoid system? And the reason is that system governs movement, memory, and motivation. This is 100% what athletics are. So real quick, I think we'll spend just a minute watching this.
Understanding the endocannabinoid system and its relationship to sports. There is a group of neurotransmitters and the receptors in the brain called the endocannabinoid system. It's important to the proper function of 6 regions of the brain. Those regions govern movement, memory, and motivation. These functions equal sports, and this means the endocannabinoid system is really important to athletes. So let's run through a quick sports example of catch the ball to show how the endocannabinoid system makes this happen. You could pick any sport example, but for this one, you're practicing or playing your game and it's time to catch the ball. Several things happen. One of them is that thought, catch the ball, fires off in your prefrontal cortex and is held in working memory for a few moments while your brain goes to the hippocampus and gets everything it knows or remembers about catching a ball from your memory. How to do it, how not to do it, and it brings all that information back. Then your basal ganglia uses that information to organize your body to take that action. Once on your way, your cerebellum, which controls fine motor, kicks in and helps refine all your angles and speed, enabling you to finish the action of catching the ball. The cerebellum is also where balance is managed. Don't all sports require physical balance? Center of gravity and balance are pretty important to all athletes. So much of movement and coordination depends on the endocannabinoid system. Then we move on to a more emotional center of the brain called the amygdala. This 5th region of the brain helps us feel excited, connected, and awe. These underpin motivation and go, another important aspect of sport. We also know that people who use a lot of marijuana.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. Not really sure what that was. I think it's going to start us at the beginning.
Understanding.
Okay, so we'll make sure that you have the links to the videos in the chat before we're gone. Basically, the video was finishing telling us the reason we know that marijuana is addictive is because it affects the 6th region of the brain, which is the nucleus accumbens. Anything that affects that region of the brain has the potential to be addictive. And that's why people don't get addicted to things like antibiotics. Doesn't activate that part of the brain. So it's interesting. There's a lot of reasons why things do and don't happen. Last point about marijuana, and just for, I think we're talking to parents and athletes tonight as well, so people may or may not know this. All products today are considered high potency products. There are 4 major types. What people are most familiar with is that plant form that gets dried and smoked in bongs and in joints. As recently as the mid-1990s, if a person smoked a joint, they would be consuming about 3% THC. Today, there is nothing on the market under 18% THC, and most of it's in the mid-20s. So the drug is much stronger than it was even 2 decades ago. The other thing is we have this large industry. They have figured out how to pull THC out of the plant, get rid of the plant body. We have liquid concentrates now that are vaped, and we have solid concentrates that are dabbed. Those concentrates can also be put into foods and drinks, and that creates this edible class of products, and any other kind of THC infused product you might run across. Those concentrates are extremely, extremely potent. Many of them are almost 100% pure. So the drug has really gone from something that you could possibly argue is casual to something that is extremely strong. Okay, so again, no test, right? Just conceptually understanding all this. Moving on and talking about nicotine. We've had a depressant with alcohol. We've had something that's hallucinogenic with marijuana. Nicotine is a stimulant. It doesn't intoxicate like alcohol and marijuana do, but it overstimulates the adrenal system. We're back to physical impacts and water solubility. And check this out. Nicotine ends up being our most addictive drug that we consume. We'll talk about it in a sec. In that it overstimulates the neuromuscular junction. So you know how that works. Nicotine gives the user an immediate burst of energy or release of adrenaline. Adrenaline is designed to get quickly reabsorbed into the body, so it goes away really fast. That leaves the person feeling exhausted or lethargic or wanting that burst of energy again. Oh my goodness, what's happening here? Sorry about that. Anyway, this use really depletes a person's energy over time, and it's how cravings for nicotine get created. It's why it's so addictive. It's also really hard on the cardiovascular system. I know you guys know what that is: the heart, the lungs, the blood, really important to athletes. Nicotine narrows the blood vessels and increases blood pressure, decreases blood flow, causes irregular heart rhythm, and increased heart rate. And this is all while an athlete is just sitting still. An athlete's always doing this when they're performing, but in a healthy way. Use via the lungs, whether a person's smoking or vaping, whether they're using nicotine or THC, can really impact performance. It reduces lung capacity, which means less oxygen, and all kinds of carbon monoxide and toxins and carcinogens are getting ingested through the lungs. This negatively impacts recovery. Again, athletes are always having to recover. That repetitive bronchodilation slows down the synthesis of collagen. Collagen is one of the most important things an athlete that's being used internally while an athlete is healing and repairing tendons and ligaments and bones. Athletes who smoke or vape tend to have less endurance, recover and heal more slowly. They're weaker. They tend to suffer more injuries than their non-smoking peers. So those are the three majors, right? Alcohol, marijuana, nicotine. We want to spend 1 minute talking about opioids because athletes can encounter them through sports injury. Those are drugs like Oxycontin, Vicodin, Percocet. Opioids can be important for healing, but we just want everyone to understand they can be very addictive. So you always want to use them as directed. You also want to dispose of them properly. The last thing we want to say about opioids is just a quick public service announcement around fentanyl. I'm sure people know and are hearing the word, but seriously, all drugs outside of a pharmacy are just game off because fentanyl is literally killing people. It is a very high potent opioid. Very little of it can cause a person to die. And it is being found in every kind of drug. So street drugs like cocaine, meth, MDMA, or ecstasy are increasingly just fentanyl products. There is a new fake prescription drug market on the internet where someone might go online and order an Ativan or an Adderall or something that sounds like a normal prescription, and it shows up as a fentanyl pill. This is how a lot of young people are dying from fentanyl. So pharmacies are the only prescription outlet that can really be trusted. Second to last topic, addiction. People will sometimes think, why are we talking to a bunch of 14 to 18-year-olds about addiction? Well, the fact is, young people can become addicted. Their brains are not developed until 25 and are extra susceptible to drug and alcohol use. We know that 90% of adults who suffer from addiction started their use of substances before 18. Public health has known this for a long time, and we have to start telling young people this because they have this amazing ability to protect themselves. We also want them to understand addiction is a chronic disease and it can be hereditary. If we're talking about addiction, let's just be candid about it. Among past 30-day users, those are people that we consider using a substance. Not has a person ever tried a beer, not has a person ever smoked a joint. But of those who have used recently, about 15 to 20% who consume alcohol have an addiction problem. About 30% who consume marijuana may have a use disorder. And then look at that last number. 85 to 90% of people that have used nicotine in the last 30 days may be addicted to it. So vaping is crazy, right? It makes us all think that maybe you can hit that vape pen here and there and it's not going to make any difference. Well, for about 10 to 15% of us, it's probably not going to make a difference, but the rest of us may really struggle if we try to stop. So got a great video on addiction, and I'm going to send you the link or put it in chat so you have it to watch later. And just we want to end with this concept of social norming. And what we always say is substance use can be kind of weird, and not in every community, but in most communities. Everyone always thinks everyone's using. Teens think teens are using. Parents think all teens are using. But when we look at data, we tend to see less use than you might expect. This is past 30-day use in the state of Georgia. And the use among 9th graders and 11th graders is actually quite small. Look at those numbers. 6% for 9th graders, 8% for 11th graders for alcohol, 4 and 7%, or 5 and 7% for marijuana. Nicotine products, you can see. And the use may be a little greater. This is, looking at a lot of communities, but if these are the use rates, look at them, think about the non-use rates, just do the math, right? A majority of 9th graders are not using substances, and a lot of 11th graders are not using substances. One of the reasons we talk about this is because if a person's friend group is using, it feels like 100% of people are using, and these numbers don't really even matter. But if you want to start this conversation, if you want to look a little farther or find some people that aren't using, they might be out there closer than you think. The other reason we talk about this is when we walk into a room of athletes, we assume most of you are not using. But if anyone is, we want to be at least one voice that asks young people to stop using. And there is amazing good news about stopping now. And that is the same thing that makes a young person's brain more susceptible is the same thing that makes it easier to stop now. Lots of young people can just stop. They're not really using for any particular reason. They haven't really thought about it. But whether it's easy or hard to stop, there can be withdrawal when a person stops using a substance. Just want you to know that's physical or emotional discomfort. It can be mild, it can be severe. It can show up like things like pain, mood swings, cravings, irrational thinking. And this may be the most important point we make all night. If stopping is difficult for any reason, get help. The days of suffering alone, really for any reason, whether it's substance related or mental health related or emotional related, just over. And you guys have a lot of resources in your county and beyond. School resources are really available to you as a young person. The Cobb Community Alliance of Coalitions is out there. We're coming to you tonight from Drug Free Lumpkin. Get your camera out and take a picture of this slide so you've got it and you know where to go if you ever need any help. Keep your camera out and take a picture of this slide. If you're an athlete, this is a set of questions that a group of athletes came up with about 3 years ago because they wanted to start having a conversation with their teammates about substance use and whether they could protect their game in a different way, if they could all consider substance-free seasons. If you're a parent, take a picture of this one. These are some resources for you as a parent. And all of you, here's that post survey. If you can spend a minute, pull it up on your phone and answer for us so we kind of know what we did tonight and where we can take this. And with that, I am going to hand it over, stop sharing, and hand it back to you guys.
Thank you so much, Debbie. So many great takeaways, and I learned a lot on this call. And I know me and Latrice met you at that conference in Washington earlier this year. And it was amazing that team from Boston, that high school football team, their team was out partying all the time. They had a losing record. When they went through your program, followed all these guidelines and tools, they had a winning season and went to the playoffs. And then that force multiplier effect, other teams, the middle school teams, all those teams started performing better. So this was really amazing. We really appreciate you and can't wait to work with you. This was awesome science-based information that hopefully will help. It's going to help a lot of people, I know for sure. So thank you again. And our next speaker, I'm very excited to hear him speak. I've known him for a couple of years, and he's a former college athlete who now helps student athletes understand and benefit from their name, image, and likeness. And he's the founder of a group called Players NIL. and a program that teaches life skills and also financial literacy. His name is Mark Kestair, and I'm very excited to turn it over to you, Mark, and hear your presentation.
Well, thank you, Brian. And Debbie, great job. Such an important topic. And I hope that people take advantage of the lessons that you provided and the counseling for those that need it. So great work and great presentation. Latrice, nice to see you. Thank you again for the opportunity. I see you there. So let's get started here. As Brian said, my name is Mark Kester, and I am the founder of a company called the Players NIL. I'll just give you a brief background. As Brian said, I was a high school athlete, college athlete, parent of athletes, college and professional. I spent 15 years in Los Angeles working with professional athletes in the content space. I was the president and CEO of a company called Sports Studio. We produced all of the scripted sports content in Hollywood, known as commercials, TV shows, photo shoots, feature films, things like that. So I'm just going to make sure I'm in full screen here. There we go. So my background really came to a crossroads when I sold that company in 2021, and the Players NIL was formed as a result of looking at the early stages of name, image, and likeness, the era that began July 1st, 2021, and really thinking about what was missing. And everyone was getting excited about name, image, and likeness and ways that they could profit and benefit. And one thing that I saw was no one was looking out for the kids. No one was looking out for the athletes. And just like I had seen in Hollywood, adults were taking advantage of young people that weren't educated. And I thought that there were some long-term and life-changing mistakes being made. And I thought that we could probably educate people and empower them to make a difference. So that's why we've created this program. I want to start with a little motivational speech. This is part of a Believe program where each letter in the word believe stands for some motivational lesson. But this is the overall belief. We have two principles of our company. The first is, how do you use athletics to better your life? And for those of you in your young journey in athletics, I'm going to hopefully show you some ways to do that. The second principle, for those of us that are retired, Brian and I and others, how do you use athletics to better the lives of the people around you? How do you make a difference? And that's really the two principles of our business. So this word believe, I believe, stands for, believe isn't just a word, it's a mindset. It's about believing in yourself, your teammates, your ability to make an impact. Young athletes who live by these principles will succeed not only in sports, but also in life. Remember our first principle. How do you use athletics to better your life? And that could be to gain friends, to create relationships. It could be a college opportunity. It could be all of the life skills that are less derived from sports, the winning, the losing, could be just fun. But those are all positive aspects to life. And like Debbie said, when you're young and your brain is still developing good habits, creating a positive mental attitude towards life, towards others, towards yourself, become really self-fulfilling prophecies down the road and can be a great foundation. I want to talk a little bit about the evolution of name, image, and likeness. We'll call it NIL. That's the acronym that everyone knows about. But really, athletes have been memorialized and sensationalized forever. For those of us that are old enough to have watched Gladiator, and for some of the young people out there that have watched Gladiator 2, what were those actors? They were athletes. And what were they doing? They were engaging with an audience and creating a following. They didn't have social media. They didn't have the internet. They just had person-to-person brand building. And it was because of that that they became so popular. To bring it to a way more current example, back in the early days of the 20th century, baseball players were on baseball cards, and athletes were used to sell automobiles, insurance, tobacco, believe it or not, soda, candy, home goods. And so athletes in the professional level have been celebrated and used for their celebrity to promote products for a very long time. Up until July 1st, 2021, the NCAA, which is the national governing body that controls college athletics, drew a line in the sand and deemed any athlete that was profiting from their name, image, and likeness to no longer be an amateur, but to be a professional. And therefore, college athletes and high school athletes were prevented from monetizing their name, image, and likeness. We saw an erosion of this begin in 1992 when the original Dream Team was formed. It was the first time that the United States had put professional athletes in the Olympics because, like the NCAA, the Olympics was trying to draw a line in the sand between amateur and professional. We know that the Eastern Bloc countries were using professional athletes in Olympics for a long time before 1992, but that was when we began to see the erosion of that line between amateur and professional. And so we started to create a mindset around athlete empowerment. And there was a bunch of legal challenges. Some of you may have heard of the Ed O'Banion lawsuit. Ed O'Banion was a basketball player at UCLA who sued EA Sports and the NCAA because they were using his name, image, and likeness in a video game without his permission. And it was there that the lawsuit started to mount and started to build and started to erode the NCAA's stance of amateurism. The NIL revolution, we said, began in July 21. And so from that point forward, what we've seen is the NIL era has been dominated by what we consider the 2% of college athletes. Those are primary Power Four conference football players, men's and women's basketball. We'll call that the 2%ers. The 2%ers are really not getting paid for their name, image, and likeness. They're getting paid to win football and basketball games. No one cares about their social media following. No one cares about their community service. Unfortunately, no one cares about their grades, and no one really cares about their future. What I'm focused on are the 98% who aren't being paid to win games, but are using athletics to better their life. And let's talk about that. The goal of real NIL, what I call realistic NIL, is multifaceted, but it's long-term. We try to empower young people to think of this opportunity that athletics has created as not just a 2 or 3 year high school vision or 4 or 5 year college vision, but of a 40-year vision. And how can you use athletics to better your life for the next 40 years? So how can you build a better you, right? How can you focus on personal growth and development? How can you create opportunities, open doors to your future, empower your future, establish a strong foundation for long-term success? And you do that by brand building. You do that by creating a persona that people are attracted to. You know, we talk about brand all the time, and we hear it all the time in marketing materials and the news, and it's on the internet all the time. What is brand? And I often ask young people to try and help me understand what their understanding of brand is. And most of them get close, but I think the one thing that they're missing is brand is not what you think about yourself, it's what others think about you. It's about what do you represent when you're not in the room? How do they think about you? How do they talk to you? How do they feel about you? And so brand building is all about creating an impression, an image, a connection, and a relationship with others that's healthy and positive, all right? And so brand building is a foundational part of life these days. It's how you get recruited. It's how you make opportunities come to you in name, image, and likeness. It's how you make friends. It's how you get a job. It's how you create relationships that will last for the next 40 years. It is also perhaps how you're going to meet the partner if you choose to start a family and create a life together. What is your brand? It's what other people think of you. The goal of real NIL is to create a brand and to create a future and use those in a positive way. This is an interesting statistic. Since the beginning of the NIL era, 80% of NIL deals are based on social media, and 60% are based on local business relationships. 100% of NIL deals are an opportunity to build a future. So let's talk about this slide for a second. Social media, those are platforms like Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn, which is a professional social media platform, which is how Brian and I met. And those are the platforms that were never available to athletes in the previous generations. In other words, before the internet, athletes had to perhaps attend a social event, perhaps go to a meet and greet with alumni or boosters or fans. Perhaps they had to introduce themselves to someone at a meeting or a conference. Today, never before in the history of the world have you been able to build a brand and echo that brand to millions of people through social media like you can today. You know, last summer in 2024 at the Paris Olympics, in 16 days, the athletes generated 23.5 billion minutes of social content. That's B as in boy, billion minutes. Why? Because we love the stories around athletes. Society empowers athletes. We emphasize how exciting an athletic life is. We want to be like them. We want to be like Mike, to use the old Michael Jordan commercial vernacular. And so athletes have never been celebrated at a higher level. And we know more about them today than ever before because of social media. We know what LeBron James' workout looks like. We know what Tom Brady's lifestyle looks like. We know what these athletes are doing almost 24/7 because of social media and paparazzi. 60% of NIL deals are based on local businesses. So let's talk about that as an example. How can an athlete, and the 98%, so not a revenue generating sport, not football, men's or women's basketball, create an NIL opportunity for him or herself? Well, first of all, you need to build a following through social media, which is building a brand and echoing that brand to an audience that relates to you. And then you need to think about a local business. For instance, let's talk about a local high school athlete that has 1,500 followers on their social media Instagram account. Those 1,500 followers are a very focused group, very localized. There's a lot of local businesses that would like to tap into that audience. Think about a pizza shop, think about a sub shop, think about a local restaurant, think about a convenience store, think about a landscape company, think about a car wash, all the local businesses that are trying to drive business to their place of business or resident or store, right? An athlete with a social media account of just 1,500 people can drive business there. You know that in 2024, and the average NIL deal was under $2,400, and that included the millions of dollars in the stories that we hear about football. The median deal, which means half the deals were above this number and half the deals were below. The median NIL deal in 2024 was $65. It's not the millions of dollars that everyone hears and sees about. And that's the 100% opportunity that we talk about. What is an influencer? Remember, we're talking about using social media as an influencer. An influencer is someone that has an audience, they have impact, they have authenticity, and they have trust. In other words, who do you follow on social media? Who do you read about? It's people that you believe in, that you feel connected to, that you have a trust with, all right? It's building and maintaining and engaging a following, right? It's driving meaningful action through connection, right? We have things that we're interested in. And maybe it's not about sports. Maybe it's about art, science, math. Perhaps it's about fashion or food. Authenticity is staying true to your values and your story. Are you believable, right? If you eat Lay's potato chips, don't try and sell Ruffles. If you drink Coca-Cola, don't try and sell Pepsi. You have to be authentic about who you are and what you believe in. And the last part is the result of all of this is the trust. It's earn and maintain credibility. So that's what an influencer is. It's someone that influences through their actions, through their brand, how other people purchase items, where to live, what clothes to wear, what food to eat, what drinks to drink, what car to drive, what sneakers to wear, where to go on vacation. Okay? Influencers come in all shapes and forms these days. What is brand? We talked about brand is not what you think about yourself, it's what others think about you. So it's your reputation. What do people say when you're not in the room? It's a difference. What sets you apart from others? Why should I be interested in your life? Why should I be interested in your story? And it's a promise. What people expect from you, authenticity. And it's your story, your personal journey, and a message. These are all things that make you relatable, not just someone that passes through a phone screen or a computer screen, but someone that stops in front of you and you want to read or learn more about them and listen to what they're having to say. All right? That's what brand is. An influencer brand is a personal brand that has influence. Okay? So we talk about your unique identity and values. We use storytelling to create an authentic narrative. We use a platform on social media to amplify your message. We create a sponsorship relationship with a local business, and therefore we power and inspire action, making us an influencer. So an influencer brand is the combination of a personal brand, of a storytelling, right? It's about what you stand for. It's about creating and connecting to an audience and amplifying your message. There's 3 circles to brand building. I think this is really important for young people to understand. When you got your first smartphone and you loaded your first social app on there, the first people that you connected with were your parents because they wanted to know what you're doing and paying attention. And I see Debbie smiling because she can relate to this. But mostly it was your friends and family. It was your neighbors, it was your cousins, it was your brothers and sisters, it was your teammates, people that are friends from school. And it's your first circle in the brand building business, okay? The second circle is the community circle. If you're a local athlete, these are people that know who you are, but you may not know who they are. They read about you in the paper, they saw you play, they saw an article about you, they saw you on the news, someone told them about you. Hey, you know, this young person's really a great person. They're doing great things at school, they're doing great things on the field, they're great community members. That's your community circle. The third circle is the one that takes the longest and eventually will be the largest circle, and that is your professional circle. And we talk about the 40-year mindset because once your high school career is over, if you're fortunate enough to play sports in college, that's going to come to an end. Then what do? You need to get a job, you need to create relationships. And how do you do that? The same way athletes create influencer opportunities with local businesses, young people today, whether they're athletes or not, need to create an influencer brand and create a personal brand that connects with professional connections. Where are you going to get a job? Where are you going to get an internship? What do people think when they look at your LinkedIn profile? What do they think when they look at your Instagram or TikTok profile? Right? What do people think about you and your digital resume? Remember, when you put it out there, it's there forever. Okay, so think twice when you're putting things on the internet, particularly social media, and make sure that they are in line with your brand of who you are and how you want people to perceive you. So we want to talk about the 3 circles of brand building. Friends and family happen organically. Community is a combination of an organic relationship with your community, but also a brand building relationship. You know, are you part of a community foundation? Do you give back? Do you volunteer at a soup kitchen? Are you active in church? You know, what are you doing to give back to the youth of the community? Do you run camps or clinics? Do you work in the Little League as an umpire? That's how you build that community circle. And remember, there's going to be a lot of local business owners in that community circle. The professional circle are the people that you haven't met yet and that haven't met you. And that's why you need to build this professional brand, this personal brand that makes you relatable to them. We talk about creating your future. And I often begin my lectures with young people today with a question: what does success look like to you? Where do you want to live? How do you want to live? Do you want to have a family? Do you want to drive 2 cars? Do you want a big house? Do you want an apartment and live in the city? Do you want to live in Georgia? Do you want to live in California? Do you want to live in New York or Chicago? Right? And think about in the future, as far as you can look, what does your life look like? And then let's work backwards. Let's create some milestones that are going to help you get there. For instance, if your future involves success professionally, you know you're probably going to need an education. You're probably going to need to choose a particular major to get you where you want to get to professionally. You're probably going to need to do well in high school in order to get to college. So although we're looking down the road, it really starts today with defining what success looks like and then building that roadmap, right? Think long term. I know everyone wants to worry about what they're doing this weekend, I know they're thinking about what's going on this summer and where they're going on vacation and how they're going to hang out with their friends at the pool or the lake or the beach. All right. But let's take a second and invest in ourselves a little bit about what long-term success looks like. Start early, establish your brand. Who are you? What are you interested in? Is it one of those things besides sports that we talked about? Fashion, food, travel, etc. All right. Be intentional. When you're posting content and creating your brand, make sure that you are doing it with a purpose, with a vision towards an audience, and with a specific goal in mind. And use force multipliers. Use everyone in your friends and family circle, use everyone in your community circle to create relationships, and use mentions and at signs when you're posting. Connect with as many people as possible on your social posts. Content ideas for young athletes, right? We start with a strategy. Define your audience. Who is it that you want to connect with? Set clear goals. Find your voice. Build a brand. Authentic presence, consistent messaging, unique personality, right? These are some of the things that you need to think about when you're creating a brand strategy, all right? Think like a creator. Reuse content. Repost things on LinkedIn. If you see something on TikTok that you like, comment on it. Maybe mimic it in your own voice, all right? Show your story, not just stats, not just, that I scored 3 touchdowns or I scored 22 points or I won the local tennis tournament, right? Who are you, all right? What did you do to get there? How did you work out? What did you train for? What are you eating? What injury did you have to overcome? Use trends, make them yours. What's hot on the internet right now? What's going fast and furious on TikTok? Try and be part of that. Be consistent, all right? We can't have this up and down creator content mindset. We have to have a more level playing field where consistency wins out over time. The content pillars to guide you, all right? So behind the success, talk about daily life, training, prep, personality, let people know who you are, passions, let life outside of your sport, right? Community and causes, making an impact. A great way to build a brand in your community circle is through community service and philanthropy and giving back, all right? Collabs and brand, right? Partner with authenticity. If you go to a certain place for lunch every day, don't approach the store across the street that you never go to for an NIL deal. Make it something that's authentic and real in your life. So to summarize, the NIL era has taught us things that we've known for a long time about professional athletes that now apply to young people today. Over 40 states in the country have NIL laws allowing high school athletes to participate. Every college and university allows athletes to participate in NIL. There are local laws, there are state laws, there are scholastic and collegiate laws that you need to follow. But for the most part, NIL is for all and it's available to everyone. All right. Build a brand, tell your story, network, use your pillars, create the 3 circles of brand building, and think long-term and look at the mindset of where is this going to take you in the next 40 years. This is my final slide. I just want to say thank you for all of you. If you scan that QR code, it's all of my contact information. If you have an interest, I wrote a book called NIL for All. It's available on Amazon. It's the 5 pillars of NIL brand building. I also have a website where we sell consulting and do all kinds of consulting to help young people, families, teams, travel teams, etc. I'd love to help out. We're about empowering athletes with the 40-year mindset. So Brian and Latrice, thank you very much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mark. So many great takeaways. I love what you said about building a better you for the next 40 years. And just briefly, can you talk about a success story, an athlete that you've worked with using real NIL?
Yeah, I think, I've used this same example for a while because it was one of my first early cases, but I had a family reach out to me from Colorado. The daughter was a Division III soccer player at a state school in California. And they knew a little bit about NIL, but they were curious about it. And they bought my book and they took my course and we talked about what they could do. And That was during the summer, and she went back to college. And with that information, she started talking about her brand and building her brand. And she grew from 500 followers to about 1,700 followers. And she secured 2 NIL deals, one with a sushi restaurant and one with a pizza shop. And she was a Division III athlete, no athletic scholarships, making $500 a month. She learned about brand building. She learned about talking to adults. She learned about business. She learned about taxes, right? She learned about how to be responsible. She's a graduate now getting her MBA in sports administration. And she's so far ahead of her classmates, she tells me, because she's already developed all of these skills. And now she's using them to create a lifetime of opportunities for herself.
That's amazing, Mark. Really appreciate it. Well, the both of you, I'm two of your biggest fans. So please follow, Mark and Debbie on those social media channels that they shared. We really appreciate this tonight. So many great takeaways on how student athletes, by remaining alcohol and other drug free, can live their best, and just how to promote yourself in a positive, optimistic way, powerful way that Mark shared. Do you have anything else you'd like to share, Latrice, before we log off?
No, I think this was great. Thank you all so much. Brian, if you could just maybe stop the recording.
Okay, well, thank you again. I'm going to go ahead and stop it.